Did you know that nearly 57% of divorces are linked to money issues, second to infidelity issues?
That's crazy. And we're going to unpack why. Stick with us. Hey, welcome back to the Pursuit of Happy Well podcast. On this podcast, we talk about setting new life metrics, what makes happiness, what makes success, and setting our values to align with what's in our heart, not just what culture puts on us. So today we're talking about marriage and finances.
Marriage and money.
Marriage and money.
Let's go.
We thought about singing, this kind of dates us a little bit.
Oh my gosh.
We thought about singing the Married with Children. That was the name of the show,
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
With Al and
Yeah.
what a great wholesome family show that was.
Oh, Lord. Yeah. Love and
No,
marriage.
don't sing it. Don't sing it. So today we're going to talk about marriage. We're going to talk about finances. We're going to talk about the two things that come up. Well, not two things, but just some of our own history and how we've lived that. We're not, just a caveat, we're not financial experts. So we're not going to teach you about investing. We're not going to walk through budgets and line items. Instead, we're going to talk about some of the emotions that come up in the midst of that and some of the conversations that we've had and had to grow and experience. And we're going to go from there.
Yeah, because I think oftentimes money is, well, not oftentimes, most of the time, money is a very emotionally charged conversation. And so, but it's also a necessary conversation. We'll talk about that too. But it's something that comes up quite often is how do I navigate talking about finances with my spouse or with my partner? Like, how do we do this? So this is going to be less in the tactical, more in the emotion psychology side and how to maybe change or diffuse how you and your partner, spouse, whoever you do money with, changing those dynamics into less of a point of contention, but maybe one with connection.
Oh, that's so good. Yeah, we'll end with connection.
Yes.
As we should. So 57% of divorces linked as a cause to money issues.
Yeah.
That's incredible. And so I hope that what that gives you is, one, a glimpse of like the reality of the importance of the discussion of finances as a married couple. And two, also what could happen if we avoid it.
Yeah. And I do think avoidance is some couples' way of
dealing with it.
Yeah. And well, it would be mine. if I had to choose, like, I'd rather avoid it and let's just go on and pretend the money's there.
Should we talk about our first budget conversation?
Yeah, we can. I gave you permission ahead of the episode. I was like, you're going to talk about that, aren't you? And you're like, well, I'm going to ask your permission. So yeah.
It's a story I tell a lot, but I always make sure I check in to make sure that you're good with it.
Yeah, you can talk about it.
So when we got married, I think we'd only been married for maybe 30 days.
Yeah, it was shortly after we got back from the honeymoon, for sure.
Yeah. And so we were in our apartment and the time came where we needed to talk finances. And so I looked over to Kristen and with lots of glee and excitement, I was very excited about this conversation.
Who's excited to talk about a budget?
Well, clearly I was, and you were not. You were not, because I said, okay, hey, let's talk. Let's sit down. Let's talk about our budget. And what happened?
I am really struggling to believe that that's what you said to me to cause such a big response on my part. I'm pretty sure, okay, that may have been what you said out of your mouth. What my brain heard was like, let's talk about all the things you can no longer spend money on and why the fun is over.
I'm the fun police.
The fun police has come and your time is over. I think because like at that point I was like, we have to unpack this to justify my response here.
Fair.
But before we were married, it was me taking care of me. If I wanted to go buy clothes, I went and bought clothes. If I wanted to go get my nails done, I went and did that. So I think for some reason, I remember feeling like the room closed in on me and I was about to lose all of my autonomy. I think is what really, I don't think I've been able to name that
until this
all
very
these
moment.
years, until this very moment and be like, yeah, why did I? And so what I did do was, Scott remembers
part of
this.
the story.
I don't know. Apparently I threw myself onto the floor. I wonder where our daughter gets it.
Oh my gosh.
I threw myself onto the floor. Did I cry or what did I do? I don't know. I just knew it was like a very big, it created a very emotional response in me.
Yes. In that moment, I had thought, I think I should have looked around for like, as if there was someone looking through a window or something that you just like had ducked from. Cause it like, you literally just hit the floor. I said, hey, let's talk about budget. Boom, to the floor. And then lots of like, but why? To which I responded to, so we can pay stuff. Like,
I think it was.
and in that moment, I was like, I didn't ask this question before we got wedded.
Before we got wedded.
Before we wed.
Before we wed. You know, I think that's what was so depressing about getting married is like 1 + 1 does not equal 2. When you get married, 1 + 1 = -5. You're like,
financially.
how did two incomes coming together? So all that to say is for me, the story I was telling myself, the moment you're like, hey, let's talk about a budget, I felt like it was like, hey, let's talk about how the fun's over. You've lost your autonomy. And that has never been you, but that's the story I told myself. I was about to lose all my freedom. But I also knew that you were going to ask about like I think I had a Kohl's credit card at the time.
We'll get there.
Oh no, you're going to bring that up.
Not that specifically, but
I was like, he's gonna clip my wings.
So you bring up a really good point, because one of the things we talk about in the sense of money is not just spreadsheets. There's a quote from Morgan House that basically in Psychology of Money, very good book, by the way. If you have a chance to read it, it's geared towards investing, but the first part of it is so good.
It is probably hands down one of the best books I have read about the title, The Psychology of Money, how we think about it, how we feel about it, and how it informs our behaviors. And a lot of people have asked me in years like, hey, do you have a favorite mindset book about money? Hands down, this is the book. It's grounded in neuroscience, how we act, emotions, all of those things. And that's really what money is.
So I think in the future, he'll be someone that we'd want to bring on as a guest if we think would be really good. But this is a quote that he has in The Psychology of Money. It says, money decisions aren't about spreadsheets. Money decisions aren't about spreadsheets. They're about emotions, history, and psychology. And some of what you just said about when you hit the ground when we first got married, it was all the stories. It wasn't, you hadn't even seen the spreadsheet. We
Nope.
could have had millions of dollars on the spreadsheet.
And we definitely did not.
Well, I understand that. But what I'm saying is like, we never even got to that point. In fact, I think this
What
this
now?
whole podcast is just going to be me laughing.
Just roasting me?
No. Well, I was unaware too, but I think, I remember that first attempt at budgeting, having the conversation about budget. We never even made it to the spreadsheet. I think we're just kind of like, okay, we're going to put that on hold for a little bit just because of the reaction. Clearly, we hadn't built up enough just emotional safety and a relationship of how that conversation was going to go. But
yeah.
So with that, the fact that this money conversation, and I think this is also not just in marriage, but even personally, that there is psychology there is emotion there, there's history there. So as we start like this money and marriage conversation, maybe talk a little bit, just real brief about maybe some childhood stories that money brought up for you.
Well, I grew up in a home that, I'm very thankful that money was not a limited resource, but it wasn't talked about a lot. I was, told about the responsibility of money, but also like money was often a point of contention for me. So for example, later it was like when we were punished or grounded, it was like monetary consequences. And so for me, money was like punishment or reward type of thing. But I viewed money as my ultimate freedom. Money meant freedom to me, freedom to make choices. And if I didn't have money, I didn't have choices. And I was left to someone else making the choices for me. So I think that brings up actually a pretty deep response in me, where I feel very afraid that if I don't feel a sense of control with money, someone else is going to control me with money. And so for me, I think what came up for me is when you said, let's talk about money, it very much felt like I'm about to lose myself. I'm going to lose control and someone's going to seek control over me in this area. And I felt very afraid. And what's funny is like I feel like the listener needs to hear this. Like there was nothing about you that would lead me to believe that. That was just like my own story and being like, okay, here comes a man. Sorry, I love you, but my story was like a man is just gonna control me and take that away from me. And so it felt very unsafe. So I had a very big reaction, which is now I look at it, there's nervous system responses. It's like
I was going to ask you about that.
Fight, flight, freeze, fawn. And then there's a very rare one called flop.
That was it. 1,000,000%.
I totally flopped.
Oh my gosh.
And that's when like you watch TV and like a first responder comes and tells a parent like some terrible news and they just drop to the floor or, you know, an animal that suddenly plays dead. That was me. I was like, you know what? I'm going to play dead. Flop.
Yeah. Well, because I remember having that conversation afterwards and I was like, well, how have you done budgeting before? And you were like, I just pretended like it was there always. I was like, no, we're not doing that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. But I think that's, you know, one, thanks for your vulnerability and just realness. I think that's pretty profound. Right. And I think it's important that we all understand we don't enter life without just totally in this vacuum. Right. And so especially with a marriage, right, you enter with some history.
Yeah.
Whether that's been something you've chosen or whether that's been something instilled in you or a mindset or a perspective about many things, not just money. But I think that's one that you kind of grew up with and it could have been passed down or it could have just been something that you processed and narrated in your own head.
It was more like how I interpreted what I saw and what I made it mean. So it's like, oh, if that's this, like if I don't have the money to go somewhere, then someone else is going to dictate where I go. And therefore, if I want to be able to go where I want to go, I have to have money to do that. And so, yeah. So money was like a source of freedom and lack of money meant loss of control and under someone else.
Yeah, that's deep. Yeah, for me, I think the childhood story was that we just had none, right? I had a family that we worked hard. You worked 9 to 5, you clocked in, you did your spreadsheets, you made very secure, stable decisions. And we just didn't have money. So the way we spent stuff, things weren't lavish. We didn't go on big vacations or anything like that, which I'm thankful for. I mean, it was a great childhood. But what that meant was for me, and this is how the conversation started, was like, I need to track every cent. I need to know where every cent is so that I'm able to understand how we're spending, where it's being spent, because we don't have any.
I think that's why I didn't track is because I didn't understand that lack. And I was just like, well, money was always there when I needed it, albeit from, my parents, or I've been working since I was 16. So when I was able to make my own money, that was like best day of my life. But because I believed like, oh, money's always there. I just took advantage of that. And I just didn't track it, which I'm embarrassed to say, because I'm sure some listeners are like, wow, that's a lot of privilege to have. And it is. I want to acknowledge that. Like I'm very fortunate, but in a lot of ways I don't want to say like I crippled myself, but in some ways I did with able to confidently handle money.
Yeah. But I think that to sum that all up is like you grew up with an idea that money was abundant.
It's always there.
I grew up with a perspective of money was scarce.
Yeah.
That at any moment it could be gone.
I want to challenge the abundant. I would say it was available, but you had to work really, 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 really hard to earn it.
Sure. Okay.
So I viewed money as accessible and available. I just had to work my tush off for it.
Got it.
That was the story I told myself.
Got it.
Yeah.
So just basically saying to the idea that, hey, what are the childhood stories that you have brought into, whether you're married or single, what are the childhood stories that are influencing your view of money? Yeah. That's a very important, and if you listen to nothing else, I think that is a huge thing just to reflect on, is just to say, hey, what childhood stories have I brought into my view of marriage?
Well, and
my view of money.
Yeah. Well, and often like how you watch your parents spend money or talk about money often informs kind of your purchasing decisions. So you grew up with your dad saying like, put it in a spreadsheet. And now that is you. You are like, put it in a spreadsheet. Like if that could go on a t-shirt, that is Scott, like put it on a spreadsheet. That is like, and I'm like, well, buy now, return it later if you have to. Which is
boy, Costco and others don't like you as a customer. All right, let's move
Yeah.
on. So let's move on.
Okay.
So from there, some of those things that we've brought into marriage is a money mindset of some kind,
Yeah.
right? So top three areas, three things I want to focus on. And we're going to call them kind of our top three money fights,
The
if you
most
will.
common like money fights.
And also, I think that we've kind of walked through as well.
Yeah.
So maybe they're the most common. I think they're pretty common, but maybe you don't have this in your marriage. But this is stuff that we've walked through. So the first one is this idea of spending and saving versus compromised and shared vision.
Yeah. So unpack that a little bit.
Yeah. So we talked about this not too long ago.
Yeah.
But this idea of because my mindset was that money was scarce and we didn't have a lot of it, and I needed to track every cent. If I could track every half cent, I would have. Like, you laugh at that, but it's true.
Yeah.
And because of that, also I knew, I shouldn't say I knew. I believed that there was no room for free spending. And that every dollar needed a job, and only jobs that it could have were for needs, not wants. However, let me caveat that with, except when I felt that I had a want. That's probably something I never told you. But in the sense of like, I could justify my own wants, but everything else was a need.
Oh.
I just outed myself. But
wait, has that come up in our marriage where like I want something, but you're like, no, that's a need, but I want something.
Tell what has happened. We had a conversation on a call not too long ago about money and how I was thankful for you. Do you remember what I said?
That your life would be less adventurous and less colorful if it wasn't for me being like, let's go spend the money on this thing.
100%.
Yeah.
And so it's taken it every time I see something on a spreadsheet. In me, I have to pause, take a deep breath, and understand, okay, what is the shared vision versus just saving and spending? Because that's how I viewed money, was this idea of like, on a spreadsheet, I'm going to spend for my bills and I'm going to save for my big wants or my big purchases, or to pay off a mortgage or pay off a car, or, have a emergency fund or whatever it is. But there was never room. My spreadsheet never had room for the didn't budget for category.
Oh, Scott, I think that's I feel like that could be a whole nother episode, but that what you're saying might break someone's brain if they're hearing, because a lot of people think that way. And if they've gone through some like financial education, they may have been told like there is two categories, or spend, save, invest. Those are the only three categories or whatever. And so you bringing up a didn't budget for category, I know someone just heard that and their brain imploded and they just thought that sounds really irresponsible. So speak to that person.
Okay, I'll speak to that person. That person is me. That person is me. So, we have young kids, they're getting older now, but
8 and
youngish,
9, yeah.
8 and 9. And I think that, obviously I think there is frugality. I would say I'm very, very frugal. And would, if I could, if I wasn't married, I would have a very black and white, boring life. And I wouldn't see a lot of things. I wouldn't go on a lot of experiences, adventures, wouldn't make some core memories that have been made with our kids because of, I would say, kind of your free spirit.
Yes.
To budgeting and, well, to spending, I should say spending.
It's like, you mean to spending?
But what I mean by that didn't budget for is there's a couple things. One, I think it's important to have your emergency fund. I think it's important to have a handle on your budgeting, your average spend per month, what you're spending things on, and those types of things. But I also think that there's a category that I didn't have initially. When we first got married, I used to track all of our spending on an Excel spreadsheet, but it was all after the fact. And so usually it meant I would realize by week 2 of the month or week 3 that we'd spent all of our money and now we're in the red. And it was way too late.
Yeah.
And I didn't have a good handle on spending. I felt like a lot of anxiety and worry and scarcity. I mean, all those pieces. And it was hard the first few years, really, until we got a good system worked out for tracking our spend. But one thing I added was this idea of like the didn't budget for category. And this was for things that like, hey, we're going to go get ice cream with the kids after school.
Mm.
Or, hey, we're going to, they're not big vacations. They're like, I would say knick-knacky things. So maybe we decide today we just need to go walk through Target. And we're going to allow the kids to pick out a book or pick out a toy or whatever it might be. Now, I will say, I'll add this little caveat that the didn't budget for is not really a category per se, in the sense of it's a bucket that kind of encapsulates a lot of different things, but it's only made possible by having margin, which is something that in the psychology of money, Morgan talks about a lot, is this idea of having margin, that there is something so profound and powerful about understanding and planning margin and not living. And we've talked a little bit about this on some of our other episodes. And this is margin with time, margin with relationships, margin with finances, margin with health. I mean, all these pieces really help us not live bell to bell, but have the space for the unknown, the inconsistent, the free spirit, and those types of pieces. Does that help?
Yeah. So it's like the didn't budget for bucket is the margin bucket, essentially, partially.
Partially.
I'm also thinking of the person that's listening to us talk and they're like, yeah, but you guys are much further ahead. You built this big business and you obviously have funds and resources, but what about me? Like, I feel like I am living, and a lot of people feel like they're living paycheck to paycheck, and margin feels like, how the heck? Like, what does margin look like for me? And here is what I can say before you maybe speak to that a little bit is margin is not about the income you make, but how you are, like the gap between your spending and your earning, and creating a margin that allows for you to breathe and relax and have, not operate in scarcity. And so, and I would say there really are some people that are truly living paycheck to paycheck out there that are like, I don't have margin. I don't know how to do that. And my natural response is like, I'm somebody that's like, and we have had seasons where I worked 2 or 3 jobs to be like, I will do whatever I can to bring in margin. So sometimes margin is created by earning more, and sometimes it's created by spending less, and sometimes it's both. So this idea of margin, it's really what it is it's a form of creating psychological and emotional safety around money. So like we've been intentional with building margin in that. Is there anything you want to add to that?
Yeah.
That
So
part?
I would say, part of the other piece is the category is spending versus saving,
right,
versus compromise and shared vision. So the idea of compromise is this free spirit. This is the did not budget for kind of category that I now use, that I can compromise some things. The shared vision piece, I think, is huge in the sense of you're on the same page. And I want to save that because I want to talk about that at the end of our episode, more about that shared vision. The last thing I'll say before we move on to the next, like number 2 contention point, if you will, is this idea of saving. And Morgan House talks about this too, is like, I think sometimes we save for things, but other times, and this is where that margin piece comes in, is sometimes we save just for peace of mind, right? In the sense of, I hate to use COVID all the time, but like, it doesn't have to be COVID. It could be someone gets sick. For instance, just the other day, we had our dog has an issue with his pancreas, and he got into an entire box of Cheez-Its.
An entire box of Cheez-Its. I mean, but also, can you blame him? I love Cheez-Its.
They're really good. Actually, I saw this vote online. They put all these snacks next to each other in competition into like March Madness type of thing in a bracket. Guess what won?
Cheez-Its.
100%.
I love it.
Landslide.
So Hank obviously knows this.
Oh, yeah. Sorry. So Hank knows this. And so he ate a whole thing of Cheez-Its. So we had an unexpected vet visit that, was a bummer, but he's now back to his happy Hank self.
Yep.
But that's part of that, like saving. You could try to save for that kind of stuff, but sometimes having the margin, keeping expenses low, as low as you can, right, can create that margin for the unexpected.
Last thought on that is just this idea, because all we're really trying to do constantly is create a sense of safety for ourselves, emotional safety, psychological safety. And there are ways in which we try to establish safety, I think, even when it comes to money. So how you naturally try to establish safety is saving, is like containing, making things tighter. My natural response is earning. Like I'm going to just go make more. That's how I establish safety for myself. It's
Yeah.
like I'm going to go make more. So I'll go bring in more money. And you're like, "Well, my way of creating safety for myself is saving." So I think recognizing, and maybe a great conversation for you to have with your person is like, "Hey, when it comes to money, like how do you try to establish safety for yourself? Are you someone that wants to go and earn more, or are you
Mm.
wanting to tighten up? You want to, lock things in." And so it helps you have perspective for the person, being like, okay, the person isn't trying to like rain on my fun parade or clip my wings.
Yeah.
This is a person who's trying to create safety for themselves in the best way they know how. Right.
Yeah.
So something to consider there.
Super good. Super good. So point 2 comes back to that Kohl's card.
Were you planning on bringing it up?
No, you brought it up.
Okay.
And I remembered.
Okay.
But,
So
point 2, top, kind of like contention point is secrecy and control,
yes.
and the solution moving to transparency and some autonomy.
Yeah. So I'm going to talk about that Kohl's card because I hid it from you for a while because again, I really thought you were trying to control me like that. Like, again, there was no indication that Scott wanted to control me. That has never been you. That's just part of my story. So my way of, even while he was busy doing his budget, my way of keeping my control and my independence was having that little Kohl's card, and where I didn't have to be like, "Hey, can I go spend money on this?" And I didn't want to be told no. So I'm like, great, then I'm not going to have the conversation. I'm going to have the credit card. No one's going to tell me no. I'm going to do it. How I thought about like how the back end of that, how I was going to pay for it without you knowing, not really sure. Didn't think that through. But I think eventually, didn't I come home like filled with guilt? I'm like, "I'm sorry, I have to tell you something. I've been spending money on a Kohl's card."
Yeah.
Didn't I tell you?
I don't remember exactly
Yeah.
how that conversation went.
I think the guilt ate me up. I think it maybe lasted a month, and I was just like, he's working so hard on this budget, and here I am like buying shoes.
Well, and it wasn't, again, and like you said, I wasn't trying to control you. My deal was like, I just want to know where all the money is.
Yeah.
Like if we have a card out there, okay, that's fine. I need to know so we can pay, right? Like we got to cover that. If we're going to put something on a credit card, we got to pay that off. We don't want to continue to carry it. So some of that secrecy and piece of being a contention point is one thing that we have done, and this isn't every marriage. So, you have to make this decision for your marriage. But for us, we've decided to condense things down to a few credit cards, very few, and we have a joint account.
Yep.
And the main reason for that is because that allows us to track money in and out. We're not having to remember 10 or 15 bank accounts or 10 and 15 credit cards. It makes it very difficult to stay on time and to keep, and it could very easily lead to carrying a balance and then getting an interest charge, which interest charge really is just a fee.
I know you hate fees.
I hate fees.
I hate fees. Yep.
So, the idea of control and secrecy, if you're doing money things in secret, might want to take a little bit of a look at that and try to unpack. Maybe there's a childhood story there.
Yeah.
Maybe there's a fear of control. Maybe there's a fear of clipped wings, whatever it might be.
Or maybe there is some emotional unsafety happening.
Could be.
That needs to be resolved first.
Yeah.
If someone is spending or, I'll caveat this. Sometimes there is secrecy because sometimes women are in unsafe marriages and they start putting money away so they can leave. There are, unfortunately, some women that are financially in places and they're utterly dependent on the primary earner, and they feel very helpless. And so I think that's another story, but the secrecy, getting to the root of like what my secrecy was, I assumed Scott wanted to control me. I assumed I wouldn't have autonomy. I was afraid of conversations. I was afraid of deprivation. Because for some, like, I didn't have the self-control to say no, and I didn't want to hear it from you, and I didn't want to resent you. So I'm just going to like take that opportunity from you, and I'll just, and it doesn't serve. It becomes quite wounding. So we've heard a lot of different ways that people do this. Like we've heard ways like there's a joint account and then the couple decides, hey, we're going to have 1,000, each person is going to have 1,000 total in spending money, $500 each. We'll drop it into our accounts, buy it, whatever you want. Or there's like we have a conversation. If we're going to drop X amount or more, we're going to have the conversation. And I think there is, this is big for me, is like this idea of like asking permission. Like, hey, can I go buy this? Like, that still causes my hackles to raise. I'm not sure if I say that to you or like, now I'm like, it's a conversation that we have together. But I think that can be a big one for some people of just like, this comes up a lot. I hear a lot of women being like, I need to go ask my husband if I can do this, especially if they're, stay at home and they don't have their income or they're not the primary earner. They're like, I have to go ask the primary earner for permission to buy this. And for many years, I was primary earner and I couldn't imagine you coming to me asking my permission. But I think I still had this story of like, I have to ask your permission. And like, how do we reframe that so it becomes a less triggering, less emotionally charged, less scary power dynamic exchange for people?
Well, I think that point that we're on is this idea of control and secrecy. And I think one reason people do spend secretly is because they either don't want to have that conversation or they are very, I don't want to say they know, but are probably pretty confident that they're going to be turned down for what they want to spend on. And so so the idea then is to move to, rather than staying in this control and secrecy, is to move to transparency. So no more secret spending. And if needed, and you have the shared agreement, is autonomy in your spending. And so we do this in our spending currently, is we have an understanding of there is, I wouldn't say we have separate accounts where we're doing this, but there's an understanding that you have a certain amount of funds allocated for something and you don't have to come and ask me about it.
That's true. I got my beauty funds.
Yeah, your beauty funds. I didn't want to out you, but there you go.
My beauty budget. I love my beauty budget.
And so if that's a way to help breed safety in your marriage or to breed some freedom and autonomy in your marriage, I think it's important. Now, let me say this. This is not, and I would say this is not every marriage. But I think in our marriage, we have and this is, I think we'll get to the end of this in the sense of like shared vision. I think we believe that regardless of who's making the money, we're on the same team.
Oh, 100%.
Right? And so because we're on the same team, that removes some conflict and disagreement in the sense of who gets to spend or whose wants are more important than the other wants or whatever it might be. And so some of that childhood story stuff matters in that light. And also I would say, what's the foundation of your money decisions in a marriage? Are you on the same team? Because I think if you're not on the same team, then it's like, the Braves who have a big budget are going to go spend differently than the Yankees.
Wait, what?
They're on different teams.
Oh, yeah.
So Braves aren't going to come to the Yankees and be like, hey, how are we going to spend our money?
Okay, wait. Do you know what I think is funny? Is that no, but that's okay. I know it landed for somebody.
Thank you. That's someone out there. Just give me a thumbs up on YouTube if that.
Wait, I think
if
there's
that
a
landed
thing
for you. Just help me feel seen.
I see you.
Oh, thanks.
Just not with that joke.
Ah, jeez.
Wait, hold on. Well, I think there's something in marriages that we have totally been guilty of this. Revenge spending.
Oh, heck yeah.
Can we talk about that?
Well, yeah, okay.
This is a real thing.
This is a real thing. I think this is a little bit, oh gosh. We're going to out ourselves here.
I think we should. We promised we were going to be like ourselves on this podcast. So if we're going to we're going to out ourselves.
Okay. This could end the entire podcast right here.
Oh no.
And that's be like, this now went from a single episode to 3.
Oh no.
I'm just kidding. Yeah. So revenge spending. Well, so one way I'll say is I think sometimes there are some marriages that we've heard that do they allocate the funds. You're going to get this amount of money, this much money this month, and we'll split that. That's your fun money. You do what you want. And I think sometimes I remember hearing about one marriage that one of them was a big spender and the other one was a big saver. And so the one saver would go and buy something that was very expensive, but they had saved their money to do so. Mm-hmm. And the other one that spent a lot was like, this is not us, but like the other one that had spent a lot was like, what the heck? That's not within the budget. And they were like, yes, it is. I saved for this. And so they would revenge spend in order to get a
Well, I'm gonna go buy that new the new barbecue.
new barbecue or the new purse or the new car or whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
So what are you thinking when you think about revenge spending? What's coming to your head?
Oh, 100%. When we have done, like, when you go out and you're like, I think I'm gonna go buy this thing. And I'm like, okay. And I'll be like, okay. Or he buys it and you come in with that, I call it your chocolate milk face.
That's a real thing.
Yeah, he's got your
New purchase.
big grin on your face. And I know you just bought something that you spent like 10 hours on YouTube making sure it was the thing you really liked. And then it shows up and I'm like, oh, you got that? And then I go buy something that had been on my list forever, and it's a revenge spend. Like, oh, if you get to spend that, then I'm going to go spend that on me. Are you thinking of a specific instance?
No.
Oh, okay. But that's what I was thinking of. Like, this, like, you just went out and spent that. Now I'm going to go spend this. Like,
yeah.
And sometimes I want you to rebel so that I can go rebel.
Oh my gosh. So you've encouraged, okay, that says a lot. So there's been times where I've researched something.
Because I knew that your post-purchase guilt of like, yeah, you're right, I probably spent too much. I'm like, and now I deserve something.
Wow. This is a very therapeutic podcast we have here.
It's about marriage and money. We're being honest.
Well, I'm really excited about how we wrap this up because we're coming more to this idea of like being on the same page and shared vision.
Yeah.
So number 3, we've gone through, it's taken us a long time to get through these, but so the first 2, spending and saving, moving to compromise and shared vision, which will impact shared vision more later. Number 2, control and secrecy, moving to transparency and autonomy. And then lastly is priorities and goals and moving to financial check-ins. I think priorities and goals is not necessarily a bad thing. But I would say if it's without shared vision and it's a soloed, ventured priorities and goals, meaning in my case, I'm the budgeter, right? So I might set what I think are the priorities and goals without you. The idea is moving to financial check-ins, having recurring conversations about money, where are we headed, where are we going, and how we'll wrap up the end of this episode, basically what's aligning with you as a married couple.
Yeah, what matters.
What matters.
What's important. Yeah. And we had to do that before we, in our transition from closing the last company to starting the new one and being like, all right, what matters? And how are we going to create margin so we can build from peace? And so hence the nails came off, the massages stopped, my beauty budget went way down. But priorities versus goals, what are the values?
What did I give up? What did I give up?
I don't know. You gave up something.
No, it's good.
I'm making the sacrifices here. No, I'm just kidding.
So all that to say, those are some contention points. But what I really want to spend a little bit more time on is, okay, so at the end of all this, how do we wrap this up when it comes to money and marriage? And a couple weeks ago, we had a call that was led by some good friends of ours, and they talked about just relationships and specifically marriage and how they make decisions. And they shared something that they had learned about this red light, yellow light, green light. And when they made investment decisions or they made really any decisions, not just financial. I mean, this was down to, you might think about, how many sports your kids are going to be involved in, or you think about where you're going to move or what house you're going to live in, or, you take the list, but basically you have a conversation, you come together and you say, hey, this is the decision. Are you a green light? Are you a yellow light, or are you a red light on this decision? Meaning, green light, hey, we're good to go. We're both on the same page. Yellow light meaning I need to take some time to think about this. And red light being I'm totally not okay with this. And from their perspective, the only way they would move forward is if they were both a green light. If there was any yellow light or any red light, they would pause and they would reflect on that. And if you're a person of faith, they would pray over it. Or you could spreadsheet it, pros con list, so that you're both moving forward in peace. Now, here's why I say this, specifically when it comes to finances. The stat we shared at the start of this was that almost nearly half divorces are linked to money issues, right? And if that's true, which,
actually more than half of divorces, 67%.
Yeah. And so if that's the case, like, then moving forward, not on the same page, is an entry point for contention.
Yes.
And we recently, just over the last couple of years, we made some investment decisions that we were both green lights on. And had we not been,
Oh my gosh, that scares me. Yeah, yeah,
had we not been, because they didn't work out.
yeah.
They weren't sold to us what we thought. And so they turned out to be not great investments. And so because of that, if we were not both on the same page, you could see where bitterness could then enter in.
Oh,
Resentment,
huge.
blame. This is why we are where we're at. This is why we have to, I don't know your story, right? Maybe it's like, this is why we're now at one car. This is why we have to downsize. This is why our kid can't do travel baseball. This is why, like, you could see where that all of a sudden would take that marriage.
It lands on one person. Like, this is why we're here, because you made that decision or because you did that thing. And I will say what helped is because we did greenlight those things together. When you were particularly upset over the investment decision, I was able to sit in that with you and be like, hey, both of us, like, they fooled both of us. Like, we thought we knew, we learned a really tough lesson. But for me to not, I didn't once have to say, like, you know, it's you. Why didn't you do your homework more? And you were being so hard on yourself. And because we green lighted together, I was able to, like, offer you compassion, be like, hey, babe, you did your research. You asked the questions.
Yeah.
We really did. And yeah, it's a bummer. So yeah, making sure communication is going to be your prevention to contention. 100%.
Ooh, say that again.
Communication is your prevention to contention when it comes to finances and really anything. It's a communication thing. So I almost feel like if we're failing to connect, I can't help but think there's a safety issue, a basic emotional safety issue in the marriage itself. Like, why aren't financial issues safe issues for, like, why is that not a safe territory for us to venture into? And it might be because someone, and I'll admit, like, I could be, when you wanted to start for a long time budgeting conversations, like, you would have to tell me a week in advance.
Yeah.
I'd have to prepare my nervous system a week in advance.
Yeah.
And, like, you'd have to be like, hey, don't forget, we're talking about budget on Friday. Hey, don't forget, that's in 2 days. Hey, in 1 day. I needed that much mental prep because I very easily would be short, snappy. I can be very contentious in these conversations. Not because Scott is doing anything wrong, but because I have such a visceral response to budgeting and my old stories of, like, I have to remind myself, like, I'm safe. He's not taking anything away. I still have autonomy here. I matter. He does this because he cares, not because he controls. And so with enough time and exposure to safe financial conversations, I now have a much less visceral response. I don't need a week in advance. And in fact, sometimes, I think recently I went up to you, I said, can you tell me the numbers?
Yeah, that was, wow.
I asked you to tell me the budget because I was spinning out. And for the first time, I needed safety in the knowledge of what was actually on paper.
Yeah.
That had never been me before. So I was like, hey, can you walk me through the numbers so I can feel safe? Because I have a story happening right now. So I'll say this. If you were to do this, like, one of the things we did to help cultivate connection for your communication here is, don't you remember, like, one time we turned it into a sushi date night, like our budget night, and we're like, let's make it fun.
Yeah, you're stealing my point.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
But we'll come, yeah. Gosh, my thunder. Did you read the outline?
Yes, it's on my lap. I'm sorry.
So the final way we're going to wrap this up is the idea of, we talked a little bit about the shared vision, right? Moving to shared vision.
Yeah.
And the reason I bring that up, and I think it's so vital, is another study says that 94% of marriages say they have, quote unquote, great marriages because they have consistent, reoccurring conversations of finances. And so what you're getting to is this idea of getting to a shared vision and using money, rather than talking about numbers, using it as a way to create intimacy, connection, relationship. So do you want to go more about what you're talking about with the sushi?
Yes. So thanks, Scott. What a great transition.
Perfect.
So in the beginning, because it was such an emotionally charged thing, we're like, how can we make it fun and light? So we turned it into, like, what's something we can associate that's positive with what feels negative to my nervous system and my psychology. And so it was like, well, I love sushi. Let's do a sushi date night. So I remember we went out and we like got all these like sushi platters and we set it up and we talked about our budget while we did sushi. Or then it became like maybe coffee dates or those things where it's like, all right, let's do this. And eventually I started to feel more safe with consistent exposure and realizing that no one was actually out to put me in financial handcuffs, so to
So
speak.
good. So good. So that idea of like the shared vision, creating safety in the midst of the conversation, if it is feeling unsafe for whatever, maybe because of childhood stories
Yes.
in that case.
Yeah.
But those monthly check-ins, right? Having a chance to talk about finances. And what I really like this idea of shared vision is that it's not just talking about numbers. Now you get to have a conversation about the deep value. It's not just about making money to make money.
Yeah.
All of a sudden you get to go, what do we want to do with this? How do we want to live? What do we want our legacy to be? It goes beyond just the fact that there's dollars, right? It goes beyond just the fact that there's numbers on a page. Then you get to, you as a couple get to create a shared direction,
Yeah.
a shared directive. Man, I want to be a couple that is able to say yes when we have friends in need. Okay, so then what do we need to do in our budget to create that ability? I want to be a person that is able to, at the drop of a hat, bring a meal over to a mom who's in need that has a sick kid. Okay, how do we need to create margin in our budget to create that as a possibility? I want to be the most generous giver on the block. I don't know, like I want to have the greenest lawn, which for a long time is one of my strongest needs. That's what I have let go of.
Yeah, that's another episode.
Yeah, another episode.
But I will say, here's the thing. I think the moment you notice something feels emotionally charged for you in the budget connection, connection talk, is, let's say, because some things like your partner will feel very comfortable being like, well, why don't we just cut that down? And you're like, oh, that's like, it feels like a lifeline to me, being like, what do you mean like my Starbucks budget has to stop? And so it's obviously they're comfortable cutting it because it's not their value, but it's yours. And so you're going to learn about each other's values. And the moment that comes up where you feel like, oh my gosh, they're about to like tread on my value or take that away or take away my freedom, this is a moment to pause and first remind yourself like, okay, I'm learning first to communicate. And just, I cannot overemphasize enough the importance of starting a sentence with, okay, the story I'm telling myself about what I just heard you say is, and like the story, because you're not getting on them for what they said. What you're communicating is like, okay, you said this, here's how I'm interpreting it. And based on that interpretation, I'm freaking out a little bit. Can you help me?
That's good.
I promise you that will change conversations. And I've said that to you many times where I'm like, okay, I'm freaking out. Help me. Help me not freak out, because what you said and what I heard are sometimes two very different things.
Yeah, like when I said budget and you heard like...
I heard like your fun is over.
Fun police.
I heard prison.
Fun police has come.
I heard jail.
Yeah. So I really like I love that idea of shared vision, understanding, those conversations and understanding how that can be a point of togetherness, growing intimacy together, understanding values, what lights you up, wants and needs, and also, what's filling your cup. Is huge. It's huge. Because there might be some things that like on paper make no sense, but they make 100% sense in the sense that you're staying together as a married couple.
Yeah. And I think that's kind of great. Like, what do we want to call it? Happy well homework?
Yes. Happy well homework. Do you want to do the happy well homework?
Yeah.
New segment.
We're going to do happy well homework.
I wish I had like a sound
And not
pad.
the kind your dog eats. This is like, and we don't want it to feel cumbersome. We want it to, again, we're not just here for information. We're here for implementation and integration. And like, how do I actually live this out? So some happy well homework is like, first of all, set up, have a money talk this week with your person that you do money with. Make it fun. Like ask yourself, okay, what would be fun for us? So if it is like, for me, if it's like, I want my iced coffee while we do that, we're going to do that. And don't make it about numbers. Maybe it just starts with value exploration first.
So
like
good.
Have categories like, here's our wants, here's our needs. And then I think a third category is like, what fills my cup? Like it contributes to your emotional and mental well-being. So for me, I want my paint by numbers. I want my little diamond dart. So it's like, I want $20 a month to buy, my paint by numbers. And so what that helps you do is it helps you better understand the person you are doing life with.
Yeah.
And so I can be like, what fills my cup? And then maybe last category is what fills our cup as a couple, as we do this together. And so that's our happy well homework for you, to maybe change how charged your money conversations feel, because they don't have to feel like a drain. They can be different, and hear it from us. Like, it used to be a very scary thing for me. It used to feel very contentious, and I would be snappy, and bless Scott, he had nothing but patience for me. But this is just part of our lessons of nearly 13 years of marriage together and doing this. And so hopefully that's helpful to you, but don't forget to do the Happy Well homework.
Yeah, Happy Well homework. So use it as an opportunity. I would say if you've got someone like me that you're married to is like crunching all the numbers, a fine steakhouse dinner with all the bells and whistles, probably not the best place because I'll only be thinking about the cost of the bill.
How much it costs. I've had to do that with you sometimes in our fun. I'd be like, Scott, if we do this thing, I don't want to hear one time on this trip how much this thing costs.
True.
Because it will steal my joy. So I'm like, be in the moment.
There we go. We outed ourselves. So your Happy Well homework, try to have a money talk and focus more on your values before you get to all the nitty gritty numbers.
Yes.
Okay. That's this week's episode. Thanks for joining us. If you would just do us a favor, hit subscribe and hit the bell if you're on YouTube, and forward this to a friend. We'd love to have you just send this to a friend to have some more conversations. And from there, we'll see you next week.
Later's on the Monday.
What?
I did it this time.